someday the masonry of Yilcrest, because we have amazing brick masonry. I want to teach you all about soldiering and sailoring and all these fun terms. Amazing brick. And when you walk across through the neighborhood, take a look at, the brickwork right above the foundation. Is the brick standing upright? Are they flat? Are they the fat side or the narrow side? Soldering, sailoring, et cetera, et cetera. It's fascinating. We have a lovely, lovely masonry. And of course, what we're really famous is, yes, anyone in Yilcrest, why they chose to live here, you know what they say? The large tree-lined streets. And they were mainly planted in the 40s. And each street was planted with a different type of tree. So we have nice biodiversity. Sad part of being on the National Register of Historic Places that there is no protection from local zoning. It's an honor to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Because of that, we can get state tax credits whenever we improve our homes, but it provides no protection in the vast majority of our Yilcrest neighborhood. And now can I arrow?
Yeah.
Okay. She says, hopefully. But maybe I'll just work my way through. See if I can go. I'll go ahead. So no protection means that there is nothing to prevent someone from tearing down a home in Yilcrest. There's no protection against that, even though we're listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Tear downs, inappropriate additions, things like that. Lack of, when they have new construction, lack of comparable massing. In other words, do they use comparable materials that would be protected? No. So they can put up galvanized steel siding actually on a house anywhere in Salt Lake. They're not in a local historic district. But I wanted to share this with you. I've kept track of this since, probably 2005. It's been being tracked for a long time. We've had 59 demolitions in Yilcrest since 1990, but the vast majority have occurred in the last 10 years. So we've lost 59 historically contributing homes in Yilcrest, and this is a map of where they've occurred. So the only legal way that you can protect, stabilize historic neighborhoods is to create a local historic district. It's the only legal way. It minimizes demolitions to the highest amount that you can. It encourages similar massing and size in new construction. In other words, can you build a house that, is 43 feet tall when everything else around it is 15 to 20, things like that. It does require use of compatible materials. Where our houses, and this is why Yilcrest is so unique, is primarily, the vast majority is brick. That's really amazing. We're the highest concentration of brick English cottages west of the Missouri River in the whole United States. That's how unique Yilcrest is. It provides design standards and it increases the stability of the neighborhood. And increasing the stability of a neighborhood is really critical to the value of your property. And in 2012, they haven't been able to afford to do another survey, but they found that in Salt Lake City, if you live in a historic neighborhood, your property, your home value, and your property value is between 10 and 20% higher than any surrounding neighborhood. That's even higher than that. So I wanted to show you, these are, oops, wait, it just went ahead too far. This is the maps in Salt Lake City, which are all the neighborhoods on this side over here on your left. Those are all the historic and all the 22 neighborhoods listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which is NRHP. And the blue areas are 14 of those 22 are local historic districts. And you can see around the map on the left where those occur: Capitol Hill Avenue, South Temple. Most of those were done in the late 70s, early 80s. And then on the lower right-hand corner, which is blown up for you on the right, are 6 of the 14 local historic districts in our city are in Yilcrest. Pretty amazing. And these are the ones that we've worked on over the years. And we have lots of people who live in those local historics here tonight that you can talk to. I wanted to show you what the process is. The process has was changed back in 2017. The state changed the process. The city adopted it. City worked really hard on this, and it's like, I call it the board game. You start at the lower left and you work your way up and follow the areas through all the different things. There are actually 14 or 15 steps, but I listed 13 here because those are the big ones. And we have, it takes about a year or more. A minimum, the city likes it to take a minimum of a year. And so sometimes it takes longer, but what you need to know is, even though this is the process, it takes much longer than that, because before this process is even started by the applicant, a lot of work has been done talking to their neighbors about whether they want to support something like this. Would they like to be involved in it? Would they like not to be involved in it? So there's lots of discussion that goes on before the process even starts. And I'll just briefly show, I know that there's other, the applicants of the current local historic districts are here tonight. We have 3 new ones that are working their way through the system. And I highlight them here. Laird Heights Local Historic District, Princeton Heights Local Historic District, and the Upper Yale Heights Local Historic District. And they're shown in gold, purple, and red respectively. The number of houses are listed here as you go across. You see they're primarily built in the 20s and 30s. They have, and this is interesting, this is something to be very proud of for all of our residents in Yalecrest, is that Laird Heights has 97 and Princeton Heights 97 and 98% historically contributing homes. And they were built in the 20s and 30s. They're nearly 100 or more than 100 years old. So kudos to you people who kept up your homes so beautifully over the years. One of the steps in the process requires that you get petition signatures to open the process up. It's non-binding, but you just say, yeah, we want to talk about it. We'll see. We can vote later, our choice, but we just want to hear about it. And then I wanted to share with you that it has to go through Historic Landmarks Committee and also the Planning Commission. And you'll see that for Laird Heights and Princeton Heights, they've been through that process. They've also finished their balloting. And so on the balloting, a ballot is sent to every single property owner. It's just like voting in an election. It's anonymous. And you have that double envelope thing where you have to put one inside the other or whatever, sign it and all that kind of thing. And those have been completed. And we are just so amazed and frankly proud of these 2 areas that have just been through all this. But they got 80 to 82% support from all the residents on the street. Those are the highest we've ever achieved, ever. You're only required to have 66%. But I just would like to share with you, name me one thing in the public realm that would even get 66% support today. And they got 80 and 82%. The last local historic district that is going through the process is Upper Yale Heights. We have our applicant here tonight. And she may have a few words to say. They pretty much are just entering the process. They're going to have a property owners meeting and the community outreach, et cetera. And so they haven't gone through the city historic landmarks and the planning commission yet, et cetera, et cetera. But they're on the docket. They will probably be going through those in late February, early March, and then going on to balloting and go for city council. So where the stage we're at right now is that we have 2 Laird Heights and Princeton Heights LHG that have to go before the city council for final approval. And I'd like to encourage all of you to write in support when they get put on. I've just been notified, I think the applicants were notified that the city council will hear the Laird Heights LHG starting in February 6th for debriefing, a public statement period where you can go to the meetings and make a statement, February 20th, and they will vote finally March 6th. And we haven't got the exact dates for the other ones, but those are on the docket. And then, and I didn't know if I should show you. So one of the things I wanted to share with you is that Laird and Princeton Heights, the gold and purple, you see in the map up above, those are just immediately south of the Harvard Heights and the Normandy Circle LHD. And so this now pretty much incorporates all of the Normandy Heights subdivision. They all are in an LHD. So that section that's highlighted in that red large square, that's Normandy Heights. We have 22 subdivisions in Yellowcrest. That is that's a very large subdivision. And then the other little red square off to the right, that rectangle, that's Upper Yale Heights LHD on the 1800 block of Yale Avenue. And I know.
Got a dinner appointment in 5 minutes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
So anyway, what I just want to say really quickly is that this is a summary of all our local historic districts and how many homes are in each of those. And you'll see totally there's 315 homes. When all these get approved, it'll be 315 homes out of 291 single family homes in Yellowcrest. So we're about 24% of the way, but the rest of Yellowcrest is not protected. And there are a lot of new zoning laws through the city that basically I call it the anything everywhere zoning. And we will be affected. We will be affected by that. Thank you. If you need help, if you're interested, please contact me at info@keepyellowcrest.org, or you can go to our webpage there. And I have these little sparklers for celebration for all the hard work that the current LHD people have done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I didn't have to appropriately introduce her because of our scrambling around that we were doing. President of QPL Crest has been so instrumental in making all of these happen. Not only the 6 that we have, but the 3 that we're trying to acquire. Lynn, you are just have been astounding and amazing. By the way, this is being recorded.
Yes.
And I think the people on the other end can hear it. At least that's what we've heard. So even though we had all this trouble in the beginning, it's now being recorded, and I think we're okay. Lynn, thank you so much. We know you've got obligations tonight. Yes, we will. Okay. All right. So we want to go ahead with if the 3 people who want to come up here so that we're not shuffling back and forth. We've got replacing Kelly McAleer, who was not able to come tonight. It's Kathy Cunningham. Kathy, if you would come up, and Paula, Harleen, and Patricia. Patricia, will you pronounce your last name? Godey. Great. If you want to come up here, be close to the sound is being picked up here by our computer. That's what we're finding out on the other end. So if you want to go ahead and sit down or come around the other side of the table, if you don't mind, just so we can have all of you up. Yes. So we've got Kathy first. Right. And so
where would you like?
Well, if we could get all of you up here, and I hope we've still got some people on the other end who are listening.
It might be better if you sat and
Yeah.
and then you can maybe like change.
Thanks. So if you would proceed, and Kathy is from the Laird Avenue LHD block, Paula is from the Princeton Avenue LHD, and Patricia Godey is from the Upper Yale. So without further ado, please go ahead and follow each other. And again, just be mindful of time. I know we got started on the wrong foot, but hopefully we're on the right foot.
Hello, my name's Kathy Cunningham, and I am a substitute for Kelly McAleer. Kelly has been our applicant throughout the entire process. Kelly had a family emergency, and she sends her apologies. Salt Lake City has a lot of stories, and I'm going to tell you one. Laird Heights proposed local historic district has 68 parcels with 66 houses on 13th East, 15th East, Laird Circle, Uinta Circle, and Laird Avenue. Our Laird Heights Local Historic District Organizing Committee has been working together for long over a year. At the beginning, we barely knew each other, and we each knew only a few of our neighbors. Yet we all unknowingly shared the same love of place. Our ongoing focus and goals were communication and inclusion with each other and with all our neighbors. And of course, to obtain the local historic district designation. In January 2023, for step 3 of the communication process, we gathered and submitted signatures for the application. We submitted 45 signatures. This represented 66% of our total residents. We exceeded the city's criteria of 33% of property owners within the proposed designation that must consent to apply. During the year, we communicated with our neighbors in multiple ways. In person, during walks, it helped to have a dog, knocking on doors to introduce ourselves, talking over the fence, creating and delivering informational flyers, letters, postcards, invitations to gatherings, reminders to vote messages by text, email, telephone calls, and in person. Our kind colleagues from Princeton Heights joined us in the process. More neighbors joined us in communicating with their neighbors as we moved through the year. Love of place. I would guess that all the Laird Heights neighbors share that emotion, whether or not they voted support on the ballot. I would like to thank Chris Jensen for sharing, for giving me, I would like to thank Chris Jensen for giving me the phrasing to name this emotion and shared value. We received help, advice, time, kindness, energy, knowledge, resources, and skill from many people who did not live in Laird Heights for this grassroots process. We experienced love and happiness with the Historic Landmark Commission and anger and despair at the Planning Commission. We learned about city policies, rules, and procedures. We had too many conversations to count with partners, family members, friends, and each other. In November 2023, for step 10 of the historic district process, 58 ballots were returned to the city, which met the city's criteria of over 50%. Of the 58 ballots returned, 49 homeowners voted support, yes. 9 homeowners voted oppose, no. 10 homeowners did not vote. The final result, 84% by homeowners for Laird Heights Local Historic District designation. Our devotion to communication and inclusion succeeded. We were close to the end of the story. Currently, Laird Heights is on the last step, step 12 in the designation process. City council conversations and vote. So now here's where the conflict comes in this story. Those of us on the organizing committee recognize some city officials are currently shifting in their support for local historic districts, given their current housing priorities in urban districts. What should we do? 1, should we keep telling people of our wonderful results? Insist the city council members vote in our favor? Or do what we've been doing all along, communication and inclusion. Listen for opportunities and talk and understand. Ask questions of ourselves and others. Explore ways we can support other people. Join other grassroots groups. Offer our support to preserve other historic districts and buildings. How can we expand our love of place? How is this story going to end? Thank you.
Can you help me bring up my? Let me bring those slides.
Yeah.
Bring them up right now.
Right here. I posted everything on the.
Is it on
front.
the bottom bar?
Yeah. Let me just minimize this for a second. And let's go back. Yours is right here.
Thank you.
That's it. I don't know how to
And-
get it on the screen though.
Well, we can try to share now. I don't know if it will share. Did you get access to share screen as host?
I'm just glad that we're we're recording.
Well, they can see it. I
I
mean,
can see it.
yeah, they can see it.
So
Do I,
go with this?
to make it fill up the whole screen, can I do function? Like,
Oh, I don't know. This is a,
what?
It's better.
It's good, I think. There, okay. And okay, I am Paula Herline, the primary applicant for the Princeton Heights Local Historic District. And I'm going to share with you half of the presentation that I gave to the Planning Commission a couple of months ago. After hearing from Kathy about the process that they went through, I thought it would be interesting for you to hear or to recognize how many layers of documents there are in the city that support preservation. This is one quote that I really like from Plan Salt Lake. As our city grows, finding the right places to preserve the character is as important as finding the right places for growth to occur. And as Kathy mentioned, I think part of the education we've gotten in going through this process is that we're not isolated, we're part of a bigger city, and that there are other communities and neighborhoods that also have important places that should be preserved. And personally, I think my next efforts would hopefully be in that direction to mentor other neighborhoods if they desire. What? I guess I'll just go like this. So I'm just including number 2, an overview of our understanding of our right to seek this designation based on city documents. Starting in 2012, this community preservation plan that Salt Lake City came up with included historic preservation. Preserve those areas that uniquely tell the history of the development of Salt Lake City, the region, state, or nation, and on the basis of promoting the public interest, allow for regulation of exterior alterations in an effort to preserve the historic sites and structures for current and future generations. The East Bench Master Plan, which includes us, it talks about the character of neighborhoods, which are defined by the streets, park strips, the types of home, and the character of each individual property, establishes the identity and make them desirable places to live. And the second arrow shows that specifically, they suggest that tools to enhance and protect our community character could be to create a local historic district. On slc.gov under historic preservation, and part of this is just to show the Planning Commission and to you what a citizen can find online to encourage them to take on this task. And online we find a section about local historic districts, which are designated by the city to protect and maintain the historic character of neighborhoods. It says that LHDs, the second arrow, provide neighborhood stability in historic districts since current and prospective property owners know that the distinctive architectural features of a particular neighborhood are protected over time. And digging deeper into living in a local historic district, that arrow down on the left says, historic preservation provides opportunities for residents and visitors to experience and learn about the importance of our past, as well as to live and work in surroundings that provide a sense of place, anchored by collections of older buildings, residential neighborhoods, commercial areas, and landscapes. The sense of place drives community pride, encourages neighborhood and commercial reinvestment, and results in a sustainable community with cultural vitality. The affordable housing incentives, also known as the AHI, which just passed the city council. So I see it here, it's currently being studied, but it just passed. It actually has a section about historic preservation considerations. Planning staff understands that there are concerns regarding the potential demolition of historic resources. And the second arrow, some properties that are not currently designated as local historic districts could be designated. This is a text amendment that's recent related to the H historic preservation overlay, where the city states in number 1, provide the means to protect and preserve areas of the city and individual structures and sites having historic, architectural, or cultural significance. And on the next page, it talks about number 1, reconnaissance level surveys, which we had in 2005 in Yale-Crest. It said it's the most basic approach for systematically documenting and evaluating historic buildings in Utah communities, and involves only a visual evaluation of properties. Then the second arrow, local historic district is a geographically or thematically definable area within the H historic preservation overlay district designated by the city council pursuant to the provisions of this section, which contains buildings, structures, sites, objects, landscapes, landscape features, architectural sites, and works of art, or a combination thereof that contributes to the historic preservation goals of Salt Lake City. And as you've already seen, our historic district that we're trying to create in Princeton Heights is part of the Normandy Heights, original Normandy Heights subdivision. Plan Salt Lake. The arrows over on the right, the circle is for another point, but the arrows over on the left, sorry, over on the right. The guiding principles are to create a beautiful city that is people-focused and maintaining places that provide a foundation for the city to affirm our past. And under beautiful city, number 8, that arrow says Salt Lake residents and visitors recognize our green network, including our urban forest, parks, and street trees as one of our greatest assets. The arrow on the right, reinforce and preserve neighborhood and district character and a strong sense of place. Under preservation, which was guiding principle number 9, maintaining places that provide a foundation for the city to affirm our past, specifically mentions historic homes. And then on the upper right, we recognize that preservation is an important component of community character and sense of place. In addition to more traditional historic preservation tools aimed at preservation of individual structures and sites, Salt Lake City offers tools geared towards stabilizing and preserving neighborhood and community character and identity. As our city grows, finding the right places to preserve the character is as important as finding the right places for growth to appear. And finally, this is the Plan Salt Lake matrix. And under preservation, on the right where I've circled it, it said that a 2040 target was to increase the number of protected structures and sites. So taken all together, I feel like this is a pretty convincing evidence that the city has for a long time planned to preserve our special places in the city, which make Salt Lake City what it is, and in particular neighborhoods that can be distinguished and recognized.
Paul, can you tell us what is unique about Princeton Heights? Because I think people really want to hear that. I mean, all of this is very interesting. The planning commission, the city council needs to know all of that. But why, what is so special about your block? I think that's what people want to hear. The architecture, you know, the uniqueness of the houses.
Oh, okay, that was the slideshow that I did for the Historic Landmarks Commission. So I don't have all of those pictures, but
you can share that.
Yeah, but I can briefly. Okay, so this is our street, and all of the houses are original. And they're a combination of English Tudor, Dutch colonial. They're a variety of interesting architectural styles. But most importantly to me, I think it's pretty cool that we have all the original houses on the street are still standing. So
Well, it's the most unique street, isn't it? I mean, it's what, 98%? I mean, talk about how fantastic this turn of the century architecture that you're not going to see in place else in Utah.
yeah, and I hope if you're not familiar with our street, between 13th and 15th, that you'll take a walk down here. But I guess I tried to show to the planning commission that we are like making a focused effort to protect an original development that's over, that's over 100 years old. And I think it's interesting how it is purposefully woven together. And Princeton is the street that kind of connects Harvard and Laird. So it was purposefully developed, together to exist as a neighborhood. And as has already been mentioned, Harvard and Normandy Heights are designated. And then you just heard from Laird and Princeton. So that's our goal, I guess, is to protect this original subdivision. Thank you.
We just get to the PowerPoint. Yours.
Yeah, you just, okay, you need to minimize this. And this is where you are.
Great. So thanks for setting it up for me. All the previous speakers makes my job a lot easier and therefore shorter. I just quickly want to say that I'm Trish Godey. It's Patricia Godey. Call me Trish, less formal. But I'm actually the applicant for Upper Yale Heights, the local historic preservation initiative. And for those of I know we're in red. We're new at this. And what I wanted to say about this is that it's the block on between 1800 and 1900 East on Yale. And we found out that it's 79% of the structures, of the property owner structures, are contributing. The city planners actually walked the block to make sure that they were contributing structures, including the ones that were remodeled. Because one of the keys to this whole process is, can I remodel my house but maintain that historical structure on the facade? And 2 of them were successful at doing that. So they walked the street, they documented that. 71% of the property owners on our street, I'll talk a little bit how we communicated, but it's really a little bit of a recap about how the previous presenters went about getting support for their application. But 71%, 17 of the 24 signed on the petition. It's a non-binding, took a lot of communication. We had to enlist, and I would say actually recruit people in the neighborhood to help us get the word out. But of the 17 signed, the remaining were really 3 were rental properties. I don't know if those property owners actually received a notice. I'm sure they did. We don't know if they responded to it. 2 of the homes were, one was a woman that was in failing health, the property owner. The other one was a new property. They just purchased the house. So we didn't have a chance to get them. We wanted to get that application into the process as soon as possible. It is a long process. One of the things I really want to mention is that we had to build a dossier, a real complete set of documentation. And Lynn Pershing was she contributed so much to helping us get that together. Without her, I really don't know if we could have pursued this application, to be perfectly honest. So big hand to her. Once we collected all the signatures and the documentation, we submitted it to the city, which then starts an entire new process called communication. Half the time, you're communicating, at least in my limited experience, you're communicating with people at the city, and you really don't know where they fit. But Lynn helped guide us through that as well. And so that has allowed us to get through the process. The good news, and I think this is because of the Laird and Princeton Heights process, it really set the path for us to actually get a 6-0 vote at the city council to move forward with the application. And, you know, that was great news. So they voted to let it move forward. And then I just heard from Nanette Larson, which I failed to mention here. She is our primary point of contact at the city historical department, I guess, that we will be having a property owners meeting, an open house sometime toward the end of January, early February. So a couple of things I kind of want to touch on, because I don't need to rehash what the previous presenters talked about. I really appreciate you setting it up for me here. What the misconceptions were in the process. It's really what an LHD is that it's really the process to preserve the historical aspect of the neighborhood. It allows property owners to make the decision too. It's not a sweeping. They need information. They want to know what the process looks like. They need to be told it's long, it's arduous. And when you're having these conversations over the fence and walking your dog, that's exactly what happens. When you're snow blowing or you're shoveling the driveway now, or whatever it is, this kind of informal communication is probably the best way to get the word out. And then we also, like I said, we use recruiting, not guerrilla recruiting tactics, but we do recruit our neighbors to help us get the word out to people that may or may not be available. Something that I also wanted to mention, this is not just a Harvard-Yale issue. I mean, you talk to some people and they think, oh yeah, you people in Harvard-Yale, well, we're not a bunch of old fuddy-duddies. You know, there's a lot of us up here that are really interested in preserving these historical neighborhoods. So when I hear that, I say, look, we have Capitol Hill, Marmalade, Rose Park, South Temple, Harvard-Yale, and let's not forget that we also voted to restore the city and county building, a massive historical renovation, but the taxpayers voted to move forward with that and fund it. So that is called commitment to preservation right there. What the LHD is not, and this is something that we talk about with our neighbors on our block. It is not a means to circumvent any of the current city plans. We're not here to say, you know what, we're done with you people. We want to be special. No, what we really want to do is we want to be aligned with social, economic, environmental sustainability. And another really important point here, it's not a means to impede the city plans for affordable housing. There's a misconception at the city level that we're putting these LHCs forward so that we can not have affordable housing in our neighborhoods. That is an outright misconception. So it's not just about talking to the neighbors about this. It's about talking to the people, city. I had the opportunity and pleasure to speak to Nanette Larson, our primary point of contact, for 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I know she was happy to talk to me. She told me so. But what I really want to emphasize with that is that I explained to her, whatever you are thinking, that's not the case. We are not opposed to affordable housing. And by the way, we don't need to debate this tonight, but really, is Salt Lake City got affordable housing? Well, that's not my point here. The communication with the property owners, I really appreciate, setting this up, because it is a lot of communication and you really have to know what you're getting yourself into and you have to be ready to go with it. So it's kind of like, I call it getting to know your neighbors. Really? Yeah. Some of them are really not, have no idea what we're doing, but they don't even know what historic district designation really even means. But I thought it was interesting in the communication process. We found that 9 of the 24 property owners had children under the age of 18. And I would say about 60% of them are elementary school kids. They go to the school right on 1900 East Bonneville Elementary. They have a strong commitment to community preservation. It's not about just the LHD, but they want to maintain that community of what Harvard, why they bought their house in Harvard Yale is all about on that block. They want the tree-lined streets that Lynn mentioned. And then it's really a long-term investment for them. They want to be a safe environment for everyone to live in. They want to raise their families there. They want to contribute back to the neighborhood, and they bought their houses in that area. The concerns or or objections that we ran across were some of the property owners were concerned about what the impact on their individual property means. So can they renovate? Can they change the facade? Can they build out in the back? Can they build an ADU? Can they build a kitchenette? Can they build an apartment above the garage? What I do is I redirect them to the city, because the city planners are the ones that have all the answers. And that is also why we want the property owners meeting to happen and the dialogue with the open house, because Nanette Larson is going to host that for us so that we can get hopefully most of the answers. But I want to emphasize, this is a property owner's vote. Our responsibility in our neighborhood is to give the information to them, and they get to make the decision. And that's what will happen in this long process. And I put a little timeline and some bubbles in there, because the fact of the matter is, you got to be ready for this kind of long, extended, painful, constant communication process. And if it at the end, what I hope for is that we end up with some type of property owners being engaged and to make their own decisions about what they want to do with respect to a local historic designation. I just clipped out an excerpt of a piece that I put in a email to the Planning Commission. I can't even keep all those meetings straight sometimes, but really what we're talking about is what we just all talked about here tonight. And that is, it's the cultural heritage, it's the historical value of the neighborhood, and it's what do you want to do? Want to preserve it or not? Thank you. Okay.
Dan, do we have a map of the blocks?
I think we can get that. We can certainly get that. And we're gonna move on. They're gonna kick us out probably, well, at 8 o'clock, we have to end it all, but we certainly want to welcome Chris Jensen, who is our special guest tonight. Chris is an historic preservation specialist. And we're just so glad to have him here. He's right in the middle of all of the things that we're talking about right now. He's been studying this issue very carefully. I think are you getting a degree? You're working on, you have the degree in that. And he's worked at several different levels with different historic preservation coalition partners. And Chris, you can explain that a little bit more. I'm going to look for your presentation so that it should be right under your name, right? So, and the time that you sent it was, here we go. All right. I see it right here, Chris. So PowerPoint found a problem with content. Repair. Okay. So we've just repaired it. I don't know if this is going to work. Chris, I'll let you go from here.
It's okay. It's totally fine. It's probably just, I use an online version because of my Mac. So
If you're back down over here, that's the email that you sent.
Oh, it's okay.
Can you see that?
Yeah, it's fine.
Chris, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So sorry, it's going to be a blank, boring presentation. It's just going to be a bunch of words. I'll try to make it as colorful as I can. I'll think of some. There's not very good historic preservation jokes, sadly. So about me, I have a master's in historic preservation. I'm the co-host of Demolished Salt Lake podcast. We can be found on Spotify if you ever want to listen to it. We talk about all things history in Utah. We have actually quite a big following. It's really interesting what we talk about. We're expanding our horizons because preservation just isn't about buildings. I'll talk more about that. Some of my works that I've currently been involved in, the National Alliance for Preservation Commission's messaging guide for local preservation programs. The person that wrote that was on my thesis panel, Cindy Olnick, and I was a peer reviewer for that messaging guide and a contributor. I'm currently working on the Carlisle House in Alpine, Utah to save it. I'm doing communication strategies and interviews. I just was on Fox 13 tonight doing an interview, pre-recorded. I also did a really cool project and property evaluation on the Wall Avenue Baptist Church, Pioneer Post 66 in Ogden, Utah. It is the second all-Black church in Ogden, Utah, the only all-Black American Legion in the state of Utah ever. I won the Stephen K. Catherine Lee Award for that back east in Baltimore. I had to go back and present in front of people from the Department of Defense, Department of Interior. So I did oral histories on it from people that were around during the time that this was going on. It was the epicenter of the civil rights struggle in Ogden. And I also did a social media campaign to raise awareness for it and worked with nonprofits to highlight it on tours. So there's supposed to be a lovely photo over here. It's sadly gone. So the state of historic preservation, this is something that I think everybody that is involved in trying to get a local historic district approved either through the planning commission rounds or through where you're all at now currently with the city council, which by the way, congratulations, that's a really big feat. You've done a lot of work to get there. And I know that like, this is like the last step, right? You're just like, you know, we've done all this work, we've done all the right things and just give us what we want, right? Like, sadly, there's no law saying they have to. And that's just the sad fact about it. But we have a strategy, I think. So if you have been involved in historic preservation for any length of time, especially on the East and West Coasts, you'll know that historic preservation is currently under attack. The reason for this is largely due to the past focus by historic preservationists on affluent white-centric buildings and landscapes. That's a little hard to hear, I know, but there's truth in that. And I think we have to recognize that as we're talking to people, that, you know, no movement is perfect. And then within those movements, people are going to be overlooked, but we are now looking forward and we are going to correct those. The vast majority of properties listed on the National Register and also in local historic districts throughout the country fall into this category. If you look, I can't remember, there was a research paper done a couple years ago where somebody went in and took every property that was listed on the National Register of Historic Places and did the research on whose properties they were and what they were associated with. Almost every association, it was something like 80%, it was a really high number, was white affluent people in the United States. That's really damning to the movement. And it's researchable, you can go look it up. In an attempt to correct past wrongs, who was at the Planning Commission meeting? I heard about it, I wasn't there. Yeah, I'm really sorry. So yeah, you guys caught flack for past issues, and I don't think you even knew it. In an attempt to correct past wrongs, planning commissions are pointing at historic districts and their zoning as part of the problem. This is a nationwide issue, And it's going, it's a debate that's happening in real time. In fact, it's happening so quickly that just last week, the New York Times published an article that was written for a case against historic districts. That's how fast it's happening. So I just think that's something that everybody in here should be aware of. You didn't do anything wrong. And I think you've done everything right. It's just as times change and what cities need, our messaging has changed with it. So on what I call old historic preservation communications, the focus on communication has mainly been on preserving buildings that fall into two categories. The first category are buildings that are architecturally significant and were built by and for affluent populations. However, this approach has resulted in leaving out large section of population as structures are designed, as these structures are usually designed by well-known architects that are considered to be architecturally significant. The second category includes buildings associated with historic figures and well-known personalities, which faces the same issues as mentioned above. I'm not saying this to be mean or to point out flaws, but we heard some of that tonight, and it's, you know, it's because that's what was important in the past to people. It was important to talk about the brick overlay, or why the fabric of the community is important, or why the setback is important, or why these buildings being consistent and of a certain type are architecturally significant. That I think is important up to a certain point still in the process, especially during the research and gathering data process and presenting up to the point of going in front of a planning commission. Then I think strategy needs to change a bit. So going forward with communications, I think that a lot of historic preservationists need to focus on what the cities and states are focusing on. How do we be better partners? How do we make it to where local historic districts are still relevant, where our movement's still relevant, and to where we're not part of the problem, but we're part of the answer for them? That to me is a smart strategy. And I think we have to change our communication to that. You'll hear this over and over in every major city: affordable housing, density, sustainability, and equity. That's what they're concerned about, period. I mean, tell who in here hasn't heard that? If you raise your hand, I'm just going to say you're lying. So in that same vein, when I look at those words and what they're talking about, they're really talking about people. We need affordable housing for people. We need density for people. We need sustainability for people. We need equity for people. We have to change our messaging and our strategy to making historic preservation about people, about communities within our state and within our cities. Everybody still with me, or are you hating me yet?
Percentage.
Oh, it's very tiny, yeah.
Like possible elements. I mean, I can see how in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
Like, what's the point of the argument?
Well, it is a small percentage, but you're still part of a city. You're still part of a larger collective, and that's what the city council is looking at. When they're making a decision, it's not just based on neighborhood, it's based on how does this affect the city as a whole. And so when you start passing local historic districts, to say one does slip through where people just passed it and did all the research to get it through because they just thought the architecture was great and they didn't want other people messing with it, then how does that affect the next one and the next one and the next one? Because as we know, there's going to be more and more that comes through. So that's really what they're thinking of, is how does this affect the future? And I think that's what I'm saying you have to be aware of. It doesn't,
Future applications.
Or driving this idea, developers. I mean, they want to come, they want to tear down historic houses and build.
Mhm.
That's actually what's happening.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a sec. I agree. And a lot of the op-eds that have appeared in the New York Times, Business Insider, you name it, the big magazines and newspapers that have published anti-historic district, anti-historic preservation articles a lot of them have been actually written by developers or written by group of PACs that are paid for by developers. Were you going to ask a question?
Well, it just seems.
Mhm.
Is changing.
Mhm. I will.
Chris, talk as much as you can.
I only have 3 more slides,
Okay.
and I will stay behind. And I'll stay behind and ask and answer questions. I'm always available for a phone call too. So, I think when we talk about preservation communications going forward, I think we need to talk especially when we're talking to representatives in our local government, when we're at this point in time. You're on the 13th checkpoint, I guess, whatever we want to call it. I think we need to prioritize the needs of the community and how we can create a sustainable future for our cities and states that also honors our rich cultural heritage. I think that has to be part of the conversation. And we also have to include how we are going to help other communities with the process you just went through, and why, Laird Avenue, I agree, is historically significant. It should be a local historic district. So should Rose Park. Why isn't it? Has some of the city's most affordable housing stock. It's all at risk of being developed. Those houses could be wiped out and knocked down within a year if somebody went in there with enough money and bought them. And they're little brick bungalows post World War II, very historically significant. So I think we need to talk, when we're talking to representatives, we also need to acknowledge that, and that we're willing to do what we can to help them. I propose, and this isn't just for you, this is for everyone, and I talked to a lot of people about historic preservation. I think our communications have to be people-centered. Without people, what are these buildings? They're just buildings, they're empty. You lose that heritage, you lose that culture, you lose the history that happened there. You lose the sense of place, love of place, topophilia, etc. So I think you have to communicate with city and local leaders. It is important to, and when doing so, it's important to emphasize that messaging that is centered around people and their communities. Why do you have a place attachment to that historic district or to that neighborhood? Is it walkable? Does it provide you with well-being? Does it provide you with community cohesion? And a community gathering place? Those are all important to a community, and that's all important to a city council also. They want to see that. So if you're talking about that, and you're talking about stuff that they can relate to when they're making these votes, it's all for the better. Also, people-centered communication fosters a loop of feedback. An example I always use in this is when we're talking people-centered versus like strategic. A lot of what we heard today was strategic communication, where you're telling your message and you're saying, here's all the reasons why this should be a historic district. And you're like almost giving like your sales pitch, right? Like, and it's very strategic of like, these are the points we want to hit. What's the difference between that and what I've already done up here? I've asked you a ton of questions and feedback and asked for your feedback. That's people-centered. And I think when you talk to representatives or city leaders, it shouldn't be necessarily about your sales pitch. They already have seen your data. They know why you're doing it. Sit with them and ask them what's important to them and why. Get that people-centered communication, that back and forth, and then throw some ideas at them. Like, oh, that's important to you. Well, yeah, me too. And that's why we're doing this. And this is, and tell your backstory. When I sat with Becky and her friends, I think I might have been a little harsh in my conversation. And I was just like, you know what? I'm almost done. It's got to. One of my oh look, it popped up. One of my not critiques, but things I said to them was, you know, when the city council talks to you or people from the city, they're just gonna be like, you know, this is a affluent, rich, white area. And I was like, what's your backstory? And you know what I heard was like a very diverse backstory. I heard about retired teachers, people that used to teach at Guadalupe, and that were very sad to hear about that church that was lost over there, that the community is still pained about. Those stories matter. And I think you have to bring those to light with you when you're talking about this stuff. So some of the talking points that I'll just briefly go over. Historic preservation should be integral to our affordable housing goals. These buildings are often smaller and more affordable, and not just structures, but the embodiment of our community's identity. Without protection, there's a real risk to be replaced by larger, less affordable homes, leading to a loss of our community's unique character. Avoid words like fabric, if you can, when talking to city officials. Character can also be wrought. And the reason why is fabric has been used in the past by people to point the finger and say, well, they're not part of the fabric of our community, or those people shouldn't be allowed in our community. So just be aware of stuff like that. Historic preservation is fundamentally about community and responding to its needs. That's my argument. I mean, why else would you be doing this? I mean, it's about you and your community, right? It's a shared responsibility to pool our resources and help other communities preserve what is special to them, promoting equity. Historic preservation can be about equity. It can be about affordable housing. It can be about sustainability if we talk about it and push for that. This last piece, I'm sure will probably make some people irritated, I'm sorry. Zoning. You know, a lot of people in historic preservation want single family zoning preserved, and they only want single family zoning in their districts. I'm here to tell you, and I hate saying this, it's a losing argument. Don't even, if I was you in your position, I wouldn't even bring it up. I would drop it. Because really, when you look at his local historic districts across the nation, and the Avenues is a really good example. Single family zoning isn't really needed when you think about ADUs, triplexes, fourplexes, and apartments in places like the Avenues. Have those really changed or damaged the character or feel sense of place or community of the avenues? I would say no. When I walk through the avenues, and I've lived in the avenues before for several years. I now live in the Marmalade Historic District in an 1884 Victorian. And even in the Marmalade, there's a lot of apartments and fourplexes and whatnot. It doesn't bug me as a preservationist that they're there. In fact, I think it adds to the character of the neighborhood. And I think we should be welcoming of that as preservationists. Yeah. I think that's when I heard that tonight, the first thing that popped in my head was like, that's smart to highlight. I think that should be highlighted. Other talking points, just to wrap this up. When you're talking about historic preservation, talk about communal and personal well-being. There are so many studies, especially over in the UK, about how historic buildings and landscapes improve the well-being of the people that live in and near them and their community. In fact, that's what my thesis was on. Community cohesion and engagement is also part of that argument with well-being. Historic preservation in historic districts help with community cohesion and engagement. I mean, proof of that is how many people are here talking about it and online listening. Also same with other community councils throughout the city, state, and country. The historic ones usually have the most community cohesion and engagement. Place attachment is also a great talking point. It goes hand in hand with well-being too. Topophilia, which is love of place, also is a talking point. And I can explore all that with whoever wants to explore it in the future. Local economy is a big one. I mean, whenever you travel and go to big cities, it's almost guaranteed you always end up in a historic area. Why? Because people want to be there.
You know, we had 5 or 6 bus loads of people coming from, they were architects from all over the country, and they may have been international. And Lloyd Ward set this up. It's the group that he belongs to. And they all came up to Yellcrest. And they offered the people who come to this convention different options of what they can do when they're here. And this was the most sought after side trip that they could have had at the convention, which tells you a lot when you talk about local economy.
Yeah.
6 busloads.
Yeah.
From all over.
Yeah, and also talk to your city leaders, planners, et cetera, about shared resources to help traditionally marginalized communities. I think that is really important. And I think that can also help build trust between other communities and cohesion with them. And a shared, and do it like out of the goodness of your heart because you really want to. And talk about a shared stake in the future. This is about the past. It's also about the present, but what do we want the city to look like in the future? How do we want to feel? How do we want it to be with cohesion, et cetera? And also, because of all these talking points, talk about how make your end argument that local historic districts can help the city reach its goals. Hope that wasn't too preachy. No. Usually they still want you to, you still have to like pull permits. And then usually like the local historic district people, I can't remember the name, will want to make sure that you're not going to do anything that's going to mess with like the character of the neighborhood.
Hannah, I know you, and we apologize.
Okay.
Talk close to the computer.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so that we can make sure. This is kind of our.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah from the mayor's office. Happy New Year. I'm going to be very fast. I just have a couple updates from Councilmember Dugan. He apologized that he wasn't able to make it. He wanted to let you know that the council has a new chair and vice chair for this year. Councilmember Petro from District 1 is the new chair, and Councilmember Wharton from District 3 is the new vice chair for the year. Additionally, he wanted to let everyone know that the temporary shelter community, which is the pods down on 6th West, those are completely full, which is great. There are 50 people now living in those units. And even some people from those units have been able to be resettled into some supportive housing, which is great.
Another 5 minutes, we'll be closing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then the medically vulnerable population or new shelter in Sandy, which is for medically vulnerable people, 200 beds, that is opening soon, starting to move people in, which is great. He also said that the landscaping ordinance is being finalized. A lot of people here, we want to save water, and so they rip everything out of their park strip. Or maybe are confused about what is required there when we prioritize saving water, but also having green space in our city. So some clarity is being worked into that code so that it's easier for all of us to understand what to do with our park strip. And then lastly, he just said that discussions are ongoing between the city and the University of Utah on Sunnyside and baseball. And then I'll jump into mine really quickly, mostly just the two most important things. I have two small flyers over here that are both volunteer opportunities around homeless services. The first one is the point in time count, which happens every January. It's an effort to count every single unhoused person in the county. And that helps us report to the federal government so that we can get dollars back from them to invest into that community. There is training for it, and you would not be alone. You're always in a group of like 4 people. So if it feels intimidating, you'll be with other people who probably have done it before. But it's 3 early mornings in January from 4 to 6 a.m. I know it's crazy early, but if you're an early riser, it's a really impactful opportunity. I think Jan did it last year. Really impactful. Yes, and great to interact with that community and, do this service that has to be done for our county. And then additionally, you may have heard the phrase code blue over the past couple of days. That is a threshold set by the state where we have additional beds that come online, 235 beds additionally, when the temperature is at 15 degrees or below. And that includes wind chill. So even if it's slightly warmer than 15 degrees temperature wise, it may be cooler than that with the wind chill. There are additional shelters that open for that, and they need volunteers at those shelters. I know it feels intimidating. There are training videos and you would be with county staff. You're just there for different shifts throughout the night. So I know that's a big ask, but they're desperate for volunteers. The shifts are like 7 to 11 p.m., 11 to 3 is the swing, and then 3 to 6 or 7 in the morning. So if you have any interest at all or know anyone who's interested in volunteering, there are flyers over here. Feel free to take them with QR codes and sign up links. Other than that, if you still have your Christmas tree and want to get rid of it, pickup is happening until January 19th. If you're able to cut it up and put it in your brown bin, if not, you can leave it on the curb and they will pick up the tree just like that, which is great. And then brown bins will be suspended starting January 22nd until March 3rd again, when we all hopefully can start gardening and the snow will be gone. Other than that, does anyone have any questions for me? I know that was really quick. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And if you can help with the chairs, so we can move on here.